Crossing the line.
The day I was released from prison, I accidentally found $1 million. I immediately dialed my father's number with excitement, but he hung up every time I called. Worried that something might have happened at home, I ran all the way there. But as soon as I reached the door, I overheard my brother's wife complaining. Why was he released? Someone like him shouldn't die in prison. My mother responded. When he comes back, we'll kick him out and let him die as a poor man. Hearing their conversation made my heart sink to the bottom. I was in jail because I had to take my brother's place. I also paid for this house and took care of them with all my heart, but this is what they did to me. I wanted to turn around and leave, but I couldn't help knocking on the door. My mother opened it and pretended to be surprised. Oh. You're back so soon. Your father just mentioned he was going to pick you up. After saying that, she looked me up and down, forcing a pained expression. You've suffered and lost so much weight over the years. How I wished I hadn't heard their conversation at the door and that her concern was genuine. I replied with a touch of bitterness. It's fine. Taxis are convenient here. I walked toward the house as I spoke. Vivian immediately came over and sprayed me with alcohol, as if she was trying to empty the whole bottle on me. Don't overthink it. I'm just using alcohol to cleanse you of any bad luck, she said, trying to make it seem casual, but her face was full of undisguised disdain. She despised me for being an ex-convict, but she seemed to have forgotten that I went to jail for her and Leo. Without saying a word, I walked straight to my room. Don't bother looking. There's no space for you in this house, I heard my father say after taking a few steps. He was sitting on the couch, smoking, with the ashtray full of fresh cigarette butts. My arrival seemed to have greatly annoyed him. I stopped and looked at him. Dad, I've only been in prison for 3 years. I'm not dead. Don't I even deserve a room in this house? My father extinguished his cigarette and said with conviction. There are so many of us in the family and only a few rooms. There's no free space for you. I didn't argue with him but asked. Where's Leo? Does he feel the same way? At that moment, Leo came out of the bathroom and looked at me with some difficulty. Vivian is 2 months pregnant. If you live at home, there really isn't enough space. But it's okay, you're my brother. Everything will be for you first. If you really want to live here, I'll make space in the baby's room, which was already prepared. Leo was quite straightforward with his response. I nodded and said directly. Sure, she won't be born for another 8 months. I'll just stay here for a while. Hearing this, Leo's expression froze. He moved his lips as if he wanted to say something but stopped. Vivian couldn't hold back any longer. She came over angrily and yelled at me. How can you be so selfish? Don't you see the house is overcrowded? And you really have the nerve to take our baby's room. You've got some nerve. I couldn't help but laugh at her anger. I looked at her and responded. We all used to fit. I've only been to jail. And your child hasn't even been born yet. Why is there not enough space now? Have you forgotten that I paid for this house in full? My father slammed the table abruptly and said in a cold tone. Watch your attitude. Do you think it's grand just because you bought a house? With a whole turkey, you want to take away the house right after getting out of prison. I responded with disappointment. I'm not asking you to give me the house. I'm not even being offered a room to stay. My father firmly said. I already told you. There's no space for you in this house. If you want a place to live, rent a house on your own. We owe you nothing. My father looked at me harshly, making it clear I was no longer welcome. All right. You owe me nothing. Everyone cried and begged me to take the blame for Leo. They said that if I took the blame, I'd be the family's benefactor, and they'd reward me. All I want now is to live in the room that was originally mine. Is that too much to ask? Is this how you plan to reward me? I spoke every word with a whirlwind of emotion stirring in my chest. It was Leo and Vivian who had been driving my car at high speed and on the wrong side of the road when they crashed into someone. My parents came to me immediately. They said they had worked so hard to get Leo into a prestigious university, with a bright future ahead, and that this accident shouldn't ruin his life. I, on the other hand, was just an ordinary employee at a small company, with a future that paled in comparison to my brother's. So, they begged me, with tears in their eyes, to take the blame for Leo, saying the family would be grateful and reward me once I got out of prison. I didn't do it for any reward. I did it out of love for my parents and Leo, sacrificing my own future to take his place in prison. To protect Leo, I sold my car, drained my savings, and lost my job. I paid the compensation, took the blame, and endured all the insults on his behalf. 3 years in prison were a torment I endured, but I bore it all. I never expected that instead of finding a deeper sense of family, what awaited me was absolute betrayal, a blow. My dear family had become ungrateful people who discarded me once my usefulness ended. Alright, I know you're upset, but we've also been through tough times these past 3 years. Having a criminal in the family made us a laughingstock wherever we went. If you really live in the house, we'll become even more of a joke. Can't you think about us for once? Leo, for whom I had sacrificed everything, was now revealing his true thoughts. In his eyes, I was now a burden, the one who had brought shame to the family. Any last glimmer of hope in my heart completely vanished, there was no warmth left in this home. All my sacrifices had turned into the biggest joke. Looking at Leo with a condescending attitude, I said coldly, "Leo, don't forget that you were the one who should have been in prison. You're the one who brought shame to the family. If you really cared about the family's reputation, you should have taken responsibility at the time instead of enjoying my sacrifices, taking over my house, and shamelessly blaming me for not thinking about you." Hearing this, Leo immediately turned red with anger and embarrassment. Irritated, he retorted, "You took the blame for me. But I already thanked you. What more do you want from me? You're my older brother. Wasn't it your duty? Do you really need to keep reminding me about such a trivial matter?" Leo spoke as if my 3-year sentence was akin to giving him the bigger piece of chicken at dinner. His simple gratitude was supposed to settle the debt. My father, as always, defended Leo and scolded me. As Leo's older brother, do you want recognition for doing him a small favor? How can you be so petty? Yes, you're a useless freeloader living off this family. If you depend on us, what will happen when my grandchild is born? Vivian, stroking her belly, spoke ruthlessly. My mother is expecting the same. You're not young anymore. Even if you move out and rent a place on your own, it would be the right thing to do. They echoed each other. Every sentence pierced my heart like a sharp knife. I was completely disappointed, but my eyes still welled up uncontrollably. Looking at them, I murmured, "No wonder you never visited me once in the 3 years I was in prison. I convinced myself you were too busy to see me. You simply found me disgraceful." I tilted my head back, holding back tears, and then asked coldly and clearly, "Let me ask you one question. Are you determined to kick me out today?" "Yes," my father answered without hesitation. My mother, Leo, and Vivian all wore resolute expressions. Clearly, there was no room for negotiation. I couldn't see a trace of affection in their eyes. I nodded and declared with resolve, "Fine. From today on, I sever all ties with you. I hope you won't regret it. This family wasn't worth my attachment. The $100 million I had planned to share with you is no longer your concern." With that, I left the house without looking back. Behind me came Vivian's resentful roar. The moment I mentioned the money, they all stared at me, stunned and in disbelief. As I left, they questioned what money I was talking about. I ended up revealing that I had come across $100 million. They doubted it, given such a large amount. I believe you, reading this story, might have doubted it too. What I hadn't shared earlier was that I had found a lottery ticket and decided to play the same numbers, which is how I won that money. I told my family, and their attitude changed immediately. But not to joy, instead, it turned to more rage, as they believed I should hand over the entire prize, not just $100 million, to Leo. If it weren't for him, you wouldn't have gone to prison and found that ticket. I told them that after their disdain and kicking me out of the house, they still had the audacity to demand my money. I left immediately, without a second thought. After many missed calls and weeks of complete silence, I thought I might finally have peace. But unfortunately, I was wrong. Would you believe my own family sued me for the lottery money? They claimed that Leo should have been the one in prison and the one who found the ticket. I couldn't believe it and spared no expense on lawyers. All of this felt absurd to me. After losing years of my life in prison for him, they still had the nerve to try and take what was rightfully mine. During the entire process, it felt almost surreal. My lawyer advised me to stay silent during the trial because the jury might lean toward my family. But I couldn't hold back when they shamelessly claimed I didn't deserve the money because I went to prison in Leo's place. At that moment, my lawyer stopped me from speaking and proved my innocence. He explained that what Leo did was a crime and that giving them my winning ticket would be unfair, as they had nothing to do with it. He even requested a hefty fine for the unjust imprisonment and for Leo to serve additional time for lying. My family began shouting that it was absurd, calling me ungrateful. Honestly, I cried in that moment because of all the negative things they said about me, even after everything I had done. Thankfully, the jury ruled in my favor. The judge decided they should sell the house to pay me compensation and ordered not only Leo's imprisonment but also my family's for being accomplices. I was also convicted for pretending to be the perpetrator of the crime, but the judge only imposed a fine, which I easily paid with the lottery money. My family was furious, and although I could have tried to overturn the sentence, I wanted them to go through everything I had endured. Since then, I haven't heard from them. Do you think I did the right thing?